Hello and welcome to another Bronte video. If you don't already know me, my name is Kate and I have this Bronte themed YouTube channel that talks about everything from the sisters' books to the way they wash their clothes. So stick around and I'll tell you a bit more about today's video. So we often picture the Bronte sisters, don't we? They're walking across the moors very dramatically, windswept, bonnet strings flying, long skirts billowing out behind them like something straight out of Wuthering Heights. And yes, I've even tried it myself. One cold March day last year, I put on a full-length skirt, petticoats and these leather boots, and I walked through the snow in Haworth to see what it might actually feel like. I can tell you it was cold, it was not particularly elegant, and it was certainly not comfortable by the end. But that was winter. So what about the summer? How did women like the Bronte sisters manage long walks in heat, wearing all those layers with no sunscreen, no modern ventilation, and absolutely no chance of showing so much as an ankle? In this video, we're heading back to the 1840s again to explore what summer walking was really like for the Victorian woman. We'll talk about the layers they wore, the social rules they had to follow by, and how they dealt with heat and exhaustion, and why sometimes as simple as using a fan outdoor was considered entirely inappropriate. There's plenty of social history talk, which I love, a fair bit of unladylike discussion on sweat, and of course the Bronte sisters right at the centre of it all. So if you're feeling a bit warm yourself today, stick with me. You might just come away from this video feeling very glad you don't have to go walking in 3 petticoats and a giant bonnet. So you might ask, Kate, why are you indoors today if it's a video about being warm and lovely and the beautiful summer? Well, it seems Mother Nature decided today was not going to be a day to go outside to film. Today was going to be a day to bring a storm to Yorkshire. So I woke up this morning and it was raining, it was windy, and even though the sun keeps going in and out, it's still not particularly pleasant outside. So we've come to my little room in the middle of Yorkshire to settle down and have a chat and not get blown about by the wind and not get soaking wet. So not my usual environment in the summer. I do like to film outside. It just wasn't going to happen. Could you imagine how hard that was going to be? So yeah, I'd need more than a carrier bag to sit on. I would need a whole umbrella. So no, that wasn't going to happen. At least staying at home, it means there is a constant supply of Yorkshire tea and a comfortable chair to sit on instead of perching on a wall. So, you know, all good. So let's go and explore. Now, even in summer, a respectable woman didn't get to dress for the weather. Oh no. You couldn't just throw on a cotton frock and a pair of sandals and just head off into the sunshine like we do now. That just wasn't how it worked, not in the 1840s, and especially not in a place like Haworth, where everyone noticed everything. Victorian summer clothing still meant layers, and lots of layers. So first of all, you start with the chemise, also known as a shift. So think of a white below the knee style nightdress, and this was worn right next to your skin, usually made of cotton or linen. It helped to absorb sweat, but also keep the rest of your clothes from needing that constant washing, which was obviously, you can imagine, a real chore in those days. After that went your stays or your corset, which helped support your posture, supporting your bust and making your outer clothes hang properly. The shape of the 1840s fashion relied on a structured foundation. I don't know why I'm doing this. Now, I know we modern folk tend to think corsets were pure torture. And yes, we've all seen those photos of women with those tiny, impossible waists laced to within an inch of their lives. But think about what we see on social media today. People posing in a way to make their waists look really tiny and wearing clothes that make you wonder how they managed to sit down, let alone take the bins out. It was exactly the same back then. Some, and I do mean some women, took it to extreme. But for most everyday women, corsets were just practical. just like we wear bras now for support. I mean, we're not wearing them to look like that Hello Boys advert that Wonder Bra did back in the 90s, just like they wore corsets to feel put together. And remember, just as we wear our clothes without much thought because we're used to them, they got used to corsets. I'm not saying they didn't enjoy that feeling like we do when you finally get to take off your tight underwear and you get into your pajamas at the end of the day. I bet they did. But like women have always done, they just got on with it. Anyway, rant over with. Let's move on. Now came at least one petticoat, sometimes two if your skirt needed that extra poofy shape. Some were made of lighter cotton, but occasionally you'll find a worsted wool petticoat. It was this smooth, strong and perfect for petticoats, especially if you were sort of trampling over the moors or had a busy life. I mean, it was still warm though, so I doubt the Brontes bothered with anything quilted or heavy unless they needed another layer for warmth, which in the summer they wouldn't. Then came your dress or your gown, which in summer would usually be made by cotton, so at least you had something lighter. But still, it was full length, it was long sleeves, and it was right from your neck to the floor. And of course it was fairly fitted as well. No such thing as a sundress or a sleeveless blouse for the ladies, not like me. You were covered from neck to waist, from waist to ankle, and that was that. And then of course you've got accessories. Of course you have. You had your stockings, usually cotton in summer, held up by a garter. And then of course you had your leather boots, laced up to the ankles, nice and tight to keep you extra warm. And gloves. Now, I suspect the Bronte sisters didn't bother with gloves every time they set off over the moors, especially not our Emily. But when out with someone like Ellen Nussey or going to church there, I've no doubt they stuck to the social rules of the day and had a nice neat pair with them. Bonnets, of course, were essential. Everyone wore a bonnet. They shaded your face from the sun, which would be great, but they also added heat. Most were decorated with ribbon and lace and flowers or other trimmings, which made them heavy. And still, you couldn't just leave the house without one unless you wanted to look thoroughly and proper. So there you are. Whether you're heading across the moors or just popping down to Main Street to the stationer's for some paper, you're head to toe in fabric, layered like a sponge cake and trying not to wilt in 25-degree heat with no breeze. And yes, the Bronte sisters would have worn this too, even though I imagine Emily did all she could to be free of these expectations. She might have skipped the gloves unless it was church, and I can't picture her carefully arranging bonnets with ribbons for fashion's sake. But this was what was expected of women at that time, and most, including Charlotte and Anne, would have followed these rules. Now you might ask, could they take anything off? Reasonable question. But the short answer is no, not really. Victorian society had very clear expectations about modesty and propriety, and they didn't just stop because the sun came out. A woman didn't simply remove her bonnet in public or loosen her collar for a bit of air. You certainly didn't roll up your sleeves or show an ankle. That was informal at best and indecent at worst. Even in the middle of nowhere with no one else in sight, the expectation was that you remained ladylike. You were tidy, you were composed, and you were properly dressed. Your appearance was a reflection of your morality. Showing too much flesh wasn't just frowned upon, it could be seen as a sign of loose character. The kind of thing associated with actresses, dancers, or worse, women working the street. Why? Oh, it's going to make me giggle. Why is it? Sorry, Mum, but I remember growing up when you were talking about someone's, say, loose character, it was done in this dramatic whisper as if you were sort of, I don't know, you weren't talking about it. Yeah, and just doing that made me think, oh, an actress or a dancer. You know, I can imagine my mum and my nan chatting over a cup of tea and a biscuit going, she was a dancer. Oh, was she? Anyway, sorry, off on a tangent. And once your reputation was in question, there was no getting it back. That was it. There's no historical record of Anne Bronte hiking up her skirt or unbuttoning her stays on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. But we can assume that, like most women, she did what she could to cool down in private. Inside the house, away from watchful eyes and only with her sister, it was a completely different matter. You could unfasten a few buttons, loosen a waistband, or even sit in your bedroom in your chemise. Of course, only if it was your sisters around. Anybody else, you wouldn't. But once you stepped outside, everything went back on, and it stayed on. And you were buttoned up from neck to toe. Now, it's worth saying that things looked a little different for working class women. If you were scrubbing the floors or, I don't know, feeding livestock or walking 10 miles to market with a basket over your shoulder, you might hitch your skirt up a little bit for a bit of ventilation and probably go without gloves or a bonnet altogether. Not because it was allowed, but because you had no choice. Labour came first, appearance came second. Even so, most women still tried to maintain a sense of modesty, no matter their means. It was kind of deeply ingrained with every woman from early on that there was a proper way of doing things. As for the Bronte sisters, well, they came from a respectable but not wealthy background, but they were very aware of their social boundaries. Their clothing choices helped mark their place in society. Even walking across the moors, they'd have been dressed with care. That said, I'm sure Emily in particular may have pushed against those rules more than her sisters. I mean, we don't have a detailed account of what she wore out walking, but knowing her independent spirit, I wouldn't be surprised if she was quietly bending the rules when she could, especially if there was no one around to see or care or take notice. Yeah, go Emily. So normally I save my tea for halfway through my chatter because it's good for my voice and, gives me a little break. But I don't think I can last that long today. I can feel tea vibes here. So we're going to crack open the tea early. But first of all, I want to talk to you about my beautiful mug. Excuse my nails. They are very chipped. I'm sorry about that. I need to take the nail varnish off. Oh, you don't care, do you? Sorry. Anyway, this is my beautiful tea mug. Can you see it? It's beautiful, isn't it? It's hand painted, handmade. It's got this lovely little rose there, which is perfect when you hold it for your thumb to fit in. See? Look at that. I bought this while I was on holiday. We were in this little French village and there was lots of sort of like winding alleyways and, places, streets behind streets behind streets. It was lovely and we were exploring. It was so hot. And we went into this little shop for some shelter and this woman was making and painting these. And they were beautiful. She didn't speak a word of English. My French, you could fit on a postage stamp. But through the international language of sign and pointing, she showed me how she painted these. And I just fell in love with it. And it's a good tanker of tea, as my husband calls it. So, yeah. So I'm very pleased to have a new mug to the collection. Wasn't the easiest thing to bring back in a suitcase, but it's a very good mug. It's a very fine mug indeed. So we're on the tea. So now I've shown off my mug and my bad nails. Let's carry on. So let's talk about bonnets. Why did I do that? Oh yeah, I suppose it's the rim of a bonnet, isn't it? I'd like to wear a bonnet one day. Maybe do a whole video wearing whole Victorian outfit with a bonnet. I'd like to try that. So if anyone has a bonnet they wish to lend me to try my strange idea out, let me know. Anyway, bonnets. Now yes, they did have a practical purpose. A good bonnet kept the sun off your face and your neck, and of course the wide brim helped avoid hot flushes, so you didn't get that sort of red, rugged look that was considered unladylike. Some were lined in paler fabrics or even lightly quilted to reflect the heat, but let's not pretend they were comfortable. These weren't simple straw hats, oh no. Victorian bonnets were fashion items as much as they were for protecting from the elements. They were often trimmed with lace and velvet and layered with ribbon and sometimes netting or gauze, and of course artificial flowers or little decorative bits and bobs made from wax or beads or whatever. If you were well off or had the time to keep up with the trends, you might even change your bonnet with the seasons or have different ones for church, visiting and of course travelling. And they didn't just perch on your head. They were tied firmly in place with a nice thick bow under your chin. I mean, you can picture it. Lovely for a formal portrait, but on hot days, your scalp would be damp, your neck would be desperate for some air. And there's no breeze going to get through all that trim. They also limited your vision. So not only were they hot, they made it harder to see where you were going. I imagine that's fine if you were just strolling down a quiet lane to call on your friend, less so if you had to cross the uneven paths above Haworth in full sun, trying not to, I don't know, trip over stones and put your foot right into a rabbit hole. Now, you might think a fan would help. Perfect idea. Just, you know, something small and discreet to cool your face with as you walked. But no, fans were considered indoor accessories only. Of course, they were part of your drawing room assemble or something you might use at the theatre. Using one outside was seen as vulgar and attention-seeking. It suggested you weren't in control of yourself, that you were allowing physical discomfort to become visible, and that simply wasn't done. So the one item that might actually make summer bearable was off limits the moment you stepped outside. Can you imagine? You're expected to endure it with grace. Sweat wasn't spoken of, goodness no. Fanning yourself was frowned on, and cooling down had to happen behind closed doors, if at all. Basically, you just boiled slowly inside your clothes. So I was talking to a friend the other day about this video, and we got talking about men. And just in case you were sitting there thinking, oh, men, well, they had it really easy. Let me assure you, they absolutely didn't. Victorian men, even in summer, were expected to dress like respectable gentlemen at the time. This meant trousers, an undershirt, a proper shirt, a waistcoat, a cravat or tie, and a jacket or coat. Often wool, often dark, and yes, all layered up. There were no short sleeves, there were no shorts, there was no popping your collar open for a bit of a breeze, unless, of course, you were a labourer or a farmer. But if you were a clerk or a clergyman or a school teacher like Bramwell was for a bit, you'd still be stuffed into the formal layers, collar tight, tie in place, and topped off with a good solid hat. Think more top hat than straw boater. And no one was skipping about in flip-flops or anything resembling breathable trainers. Oh no. It was proper leather boots, nice and stiff, nice and hot, and not designed with comfort in mind. Perfect if you were, say, just walking down to the post box. Not so perfect if you were trying to hike across the moors in the middle of an August heatwave. And just in case it wasn't already enough, let me remind you, yes, they wore wool underwear. Wool. Itchy underwear in summer. Sometimes it was that worsted wool that we mentioned, which was softer and obviously finer than the itchy stuff that we associate with winter jumpers today, but still not exactly what you want sticking to your thighs in the middle of a heat wave. Men, like women, were judged on their appearance and their decorum. I mean, a man walking around in shirt sleeves without a waistcoat could easily be seen as, oh, disrespectful, even slovenly. You were expected to dress for your class, your role in your position in society, not the temperature. So no, the men weren't frolicking about in linen and sandals either. They were just as sweaty, just as buttoned up and red-faced as the poor women. They just didn't talk about it. Another thing to keep in mind, the sun was absolutely not your friend if you're a lady of a certain standing. A tan wasn't a sign of health or an active outdoor life like it might be today. Oh, no. A tan meant labour. It meant you worked outside all day, or you were probably poor, rural and uneducated. A ruddy complexion was a badge of the working class. For women in genteel society, paler skin was a sign of status and respectability. I'd do very well with my pale skin, wouldn't I? It was a way of saying, I don't have to labour in the fields, I have the luxury of staying indoors or in the shade. It was all about appearances, and a fair, unblemished complexion was prized. I mean, this is one reason parasols became such a popular accessory. They weren't just for practical shade, they were a visible marker of gentility. Carrying a parasol told everyone you belonged to the classes that could afford leisure and had that sense to protect the skin from the sun's harshness. Ladies did not want bronze shoulder or freckled faces. Oh, no. A sunburnt nose was downright embarrassing. It wasn't charming or romantic like you might see in today's fashion magazines or on Instagram. Going out with bare arms or a bare neck just to catch a bit of colour would have been unthinkable. And really, who would want to stand in a full sun when you had all those layers on anyway? I mean, you'd naturally want to stay in the shade as much as possible to avoid overheating or discomfort. There was no sunscreen, there was no Factor 50 face mist, and certainly no quick fixes for red blistered skin. All you had was shade, bonnets, long sleeves, and the hope that they didn't end up peeling in agony. The Bronte sisters living in a rural village would have been no different. They likely took care to avoid the sun's glare as much as possible, even on their walks. Their pale complexions and careful dress marked their place in society, and it protected their reputations. Where were we? That's the problem. I lose my flow, I lose my place, and I forget what I'm talking about. Maybe I just need to sort of have a little checklist where I tick things off and remember what we were talking about. But I get so into my own world when I do these videos. Yeah. I do enjoy them though. I do enjoy making these videos. I go down a rabbit hole where I get an idea and then I go, I'll just look it up, and I get 1 or 2 books out of the shelf. There's some more down here, plus more up there and more over there. And I start going through my books and I start Googling things and, you know, reminding myself of stuff that I knew but couldn't be completely sure about. And I love it. I love it. Right, let's get on. So with all that in mind, how much walking did the Bronte sisters actually do? Well, quite a lot, in fact. From their letters, their diaries and their biographies, we know that Charlotte, Emily and Anne were regular walkers. I mean, it was part of their daily life. Emily especially was famous for those long solitary rambles with Keeper. I mean, she set off alone for hours, sometimes covering several miles across the wild moorland around Haworth. She wasn't just wandering in a field nearby. Oh, no. She often walked as far as Top Withens, the ruined farmhouse we believe to have inspired Wuthering Heights, or even further across the moors to Pondon Kirk, where the fairy caves are. I think we need to talk about the fairy caves one day, but I'm not going to do it now because I will go off on one and I really need to focus on this. So yes, let's talk fairy caves one day, one day soon. Anyway, where was I? Charlotte too, she was a really keen walker, often with her sisters, but she also was known to walk with her good friend Ellen Nussey. And I bet those walks with Ellen was that chance for them to talk freely and maybe have a bit of a gossip, but enjoy the privacy without the family being around them. You could almost say it was freedom in walking and in talking, which must have been a real rare treat for them. Together, Charlotte and Ellen would spend hours on foot, covering several miles at a stretch, and usually over quite rough and uneven ground. Even their father, Patrick, was no stranger to walking. Into his 70s, he still made regular trips to Bradford on foot, quite a distance for an old man, considering the hills and the terrain. Now, did they always set off fully decked out in bonnets, gloves and parasols? Possibly not. If they were kind of just popping over the gate for a quick walk on the moors, I suspect they loosened up a bit. I mean, these were familiar private spaces after all, places where the sisters could be freer. They called the Bronte waterfall, or the waterfall we know as the Bronte waterfall near Haworth, the meeting of the waters, a quiet, special spot, away from prying eyes and gossip. So I can imagine them slipping off their boots and stockings to paddle in that lovely cool water and feeling the relief after a long hot walk. Perhaps they loosened their collars, or they even took their hats off to sort of catch a breeze on their face. I like to imagine that it was a break from being ladies and they could be girls again. I mean, after all, you've walked 2 miles uphill in full summer dress with all those layers, boots, bonnets and whatnot. I mean, that's no small effort. They would have earned that moment, I'm sure. So what happened when it all just got too much? Fainting was incredibly common. It wasn't just a bit of theatrical drama that you read about in novels. Tight corsets, dehydration, heat exhaustion and poor ventilation made it a real risk. Victorian women, especially those wearing all these layers in summer, were often quite close to their limits. Sweating, though, was a subject just not mentioned. We just didn't talk about it. Women blushed, they didn't sweat. Women weren't supposed to do it. It was unladylike, it was unbecoming, it was something to be quite endured and hidden. Of course, everyone sweated. It's impossible not to in those clothes and of course in that heat. The difference was men could take their jackets off in the right setting, of course, or they could wipe their brow again in the right setting. But women had to suffer quietly and keep up that appearance all the time. One practical detail is that the undergarments, the shift that the women wore, were made of simple cotton, which was breathable, and they could be washed regularly, keep that fresh feeling and obviously manage the smell of sweat. The outer dresses, however, were made of sort of complicated fabrics, and of course the stitching was more delicate and they were much harder to wash and dry, especially in Yorkshire when it rained. So no one wanted to get these dresses sweaty. I mean, the smell would have been really difficult to remove and it would have just taken a lot of air in. And if a woman did faint, which, let's be honest, was more common than not, one of the go-to remedies was a cloth soaked in vinegar water, gently laid on the forehead or the wrist. Now, it sounds odd to us today, but vinegar, as we know, has this sharp smell, and a bit like an early version of a smelling salts. It was thought to jolt the senses and revive someone gently. It also had a cooling effect as it evaporated, and in an age when, of course, there was no ice packs, that was about as good as it got. Practical, pungent maybe, and probably quite unpleasant, but it's what they had. You might be lucky and get a little sip of barley water. I think brandy probably would have been better myself, but you know. And you probably got a stern warning not to push yourself so hard again. That said, I can't imagine Emily doing anything quite so pathetic as fainting. I say pathetic because I can imagine she was thinking that was a weakness. I think she would have done whatever it took to avoid looking vulnerable or standing out in public. Honestly, considering all this, it's a wonder Maud didn't simply just faint face first in the sewage-covered cobbles of Main Street. Oh, it's really hot in here now. It's still really windy outside and the rain has stopped, but it's still sunny, but the wind is making it cold, if that makes sense. But this room is heating up. I've got the sun, it's behind the camera, it's heating up. So yeah, I am glad I am not wearing a corset and petticoats and whatever, because I don't know how they coped. I don't do very well with the warm weather at all. But yeah, so I am very pleased in some ways that modern life means we can wear short sleeve tops. I'm not so happy about some of the things that are acceptable in fashion nowadays. Maybe I'm old fashioned, I don't know, but yeah, I'm pleased that, you know, we can wear slightly baggier clothes than they did back then. Even slovenly. Good. All's good. Again, hot. I need a fan. I'm indoors, I'm allowed to use a fan. Where is it? I think my fan is upstairs. I brought it back from holiday, which I used a lot. But no, I'll have to find something else to waft myself with. Fair and blemished complexion. I can't even say it. Oh, doorbell. I'll be back in a minute. Oh, I'm back. That was the plumber. Here to sort the hot water. Well, sort the hot water. We don't have hot water. He's here to make it happen. So I'll leave him to it, doing whatever plumbers do up there. And I don't think you're even meant to call them that. I think you're meant to call them heating engineers now, aren't you? They're not plumbers, but sorry, all plumbers out there. Right, let's get back to it. Where was I? And yet they walked in their boots, stockings, corsets, petticoats, and of course their long sleeves. But they walked for solitude, for imagination, for independence, for space. I mean, women of that time knew their limits. And on really hot days, they might wait until the afternoon cooled down a bit or simply walked more slowly to avoid overheating. They understood how heavy and stifling their clothes could be in the heat, and they judged carefully what was possible without turning tomato red or fainting whilst walking past the Black Bull in front of all the men. I mean, Yorkshire doesn't see that many scorching hot days compared to other places, but I'm sure even a mild spring day could be hard work when you've got all those layers. Us modern folk might not cope well with all of that, but we don't need to. We have the option to throw on shorts and a loose top and slip on sandals or flip-flops and carry a bottle of water wherever we go. But for women in the 1840s, life was more about reputation, what people thought, what people saw, and of course, protecting your good name. If that meant keeping to the shade and walking at a snail's pace so you weren't a sweaty mess by the time you got to church, then so be it. That was far better than risking being labelled a loose woman simply because you showed too much ankle or neck. I mean, reputation was everything. Who would marry you if your name was mud? I mean, that's the reality they lived in every day. So the next time you're out in the sunshine and you feel a hot flush coming on, or your bra is sticking to your back, or your sandals are rubbing, or whatever, just remember the Bronte sisters marching across the Yorkshire moors in their 3 layers of cotton, their leather boots and gloves and bonnet, dreaming up Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights in 25-degree heat. They may have kept their layers on, but I like to think that in the waterfall, when no one was looking, they paddled. So, question time. I have my 3 questions for you this week. Let me know what you think. So, number 1, what surprised you the most about how Victorian women managed during the summer, walking in all their layers? Number 2, can you imagine yourself taking a long walk on the moors dressed like the Bronte sisters? And what do you think would have been the hardest part? And number 3, do you have a favourite Bronte related walking spot or a special memory from walking in the Yorkshire moors? I would love to hear your thoughts and your stories, so please do share them. Plus, I'm loving how the comment section is becoming a real community and everyone's chatting. I've always wanted it to be that. I've always wanted everyone to be able to share their thoughts and their ideas. So it's great that it's happening. So thank you all so very much. But also, I want to say how amazed and happy I am that for the whole time I've been doing this now, I have not seen one nasty comment under my channel, that is, in the comments. There's not been one nasty one at all. And I think that's so lovely that everyone is so respectful and kind. So do keep it up, because I think it's a wonderful thing and it makes everyone feel so comfortable. So thank you. Like I say every week, and I probably will say forevermore now, if you like this video, please do the whole likey, subscribey thing, because it really helps me out and it lets YouTube know that we want to watch more Bronte content. So thank you once again. Have a good weekend. Take care, and I will see you all the Friday after next for more Bronte adventures. Okay, take care. Bye.